You are listening to That's What I Call Marketing with your host, Connor Byrne.
Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Don't forget to review or rate this episode wherever you are listening or watching. It really does help us build on this amazing community of engaged marketers just like you and reach a whole new audience. If you are interested in getting involved with That's What I Call Marketing, our sponsorship kit is now available. Visit that'swhaticallmarketing.com/sponsor and get in touch and chat to us about it. Well, you may recall in February, Walter T. Gear, Chief Creative and Innovation Officer at VML, shut down his social media platforms and instead used them to amplify the voices of black women that he said needed a megaphone. He commented that historically black women had consistently been called upon to help solve the world's problems. It wasn't too long ago that leaders and companies called upon and hired many of these women to save their companies by addressing diversity issues. Now, only a few years later, many of these same leaders and companies seem to have forgotten the very people who helped dig them out of a hole and survive. Off the back of that, I got in touch with most of the people who Walter had highlighted and was really grateful when 6 of them responded and said they would participate in a podcast with me talking about the issues of diversity in our industry. Last month I released the first part of the series and today is the second part, Inclusion in Action, and I'm joined by Dr. Camille, Anika and Chloe, an incredibly insightful lineup, and they share their journeys, struggles, victories, discuss the systemic barriers as they navigate their daily lives. Dr. White is CEO of Inspire to Evolve, and she shares her journey from medicine to tech, focusing on empowering individuals for better health and career satisfaction. Chloe is founder of It Takes a Village, and she emphasizes the importance of addressing black mental health and using her platform for advocacy and change. And Anika highlights her commitment to supporting children with special needs as she founded Lapapoe to provide resources for these families. And similar to the first episode in these series, it's incredible to see these leaders going out and actually establishing and setting their own businesses to address the issues that they see we are facing. So join us as we uncover the realities behind diversity, the power dynamics at play, and what true allyship looks like in action. Get ready for a conversation that is full of learnings, unfiltered truths, and hopefully shows us a path forward. The episode is going to start after this short word from our sponsors.
Today's show is supported by the Indie List, the leader in providing you with easy access to hundreds of highly experienced marketers quickly and cost effectively. Visit theindielist.ie to speak to the Indie List team today.
Are you facing the maze of global expansion? Diplomat introduces the diplomacy model, a cost-effective, innovative approach to navigating the complexities of your brand's presence in international markets. Visit diplomat.agency.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
Thank you all so much for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. Delighted to have you all here. Probably a good place to start. We'll do some quick introductions, if that's okay. And I will start with you, Dr. Camille, if that's okay.
Sure. My name is Dr. Camille White. I'm the CEO of Inspire to Evolve. I am a physician by training, and I've pivoted my career 3 different times. Number 1 from medicine, number 2 into government contracting, and then number 3 into big tech. I started my company from the perspective of being a physician. When I was in the clinics, I saw a lot of people come in with disease and ailments related to the work that they've done, whether it be stress, a physical ailment, mental illness, ending up on psychiatric medications. I saw that. And at the time, I didn't understand it fully. But as I transitioned through the different roles, not only did I understand it, but I experienced it myself as a Black woman with 4 different degrees. And with that in mind, I had an opportunity to start this company, and I did it. And I inspire, motivate, and challenge people to navigate their careers and have less stress and better health outcomes. So through this work, I'm impacting as many women and others as possible to get themselves in a better space, and just empowerment and resilience and taking control of what is ours, our birthright.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Chloe, we'll go to you next, if that's okay.
Of course. And I love the symmetry of our relations. Or I guess our relationships are kind of where we've occupied space. So my name's Chloe Davies. I have worked in a lot of different sectors. I started in retail, and then kind of traveled through to pretty much every industry and ended up in advertising just under 3 years ago. I'm the founder of a collective global hub for Black women called It Takes a Village. And really, I think in a similar vein to Dr. Camille, found so many frustrations. I'm an ambassador for Mental Health First Aid England, and have really been leading for the last 3 years on how we talk about Black mental health and Black LGBTQ plus mental health, as someone that classes herself as a mental health survivor. And so coming into Adland was a bit, I say, like coming into Neverland, and just wild chaos, and really wanted to be seen for my skills and to utilize those skills rather than the color of my skin. And so because of many of the frustrations, many of the battles that I had faced, but every time I saw a mirror image of myself and another Black woman, we had the same shared commonality, the same issues. It was really about how I could use the platform and the passing privilege that I have as a senior Black woman in this space to be the change. And so we really are trying to drive towards having true agency and true equity. And that's the work that I do both in Adland, but wider afield in community and not-for-profit, many other different spaces that I show up. I'm also a mum to 2 neurodivergent children. My eldest son is autistic and nonverbal, and my second son has ADHD. So being their voice has really become much of why I also do what I do.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Anika, you're joining us from Atlanta.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Am I right? You're in Atlanta today?
Yes, I am
Okay.
definitely in Atlanta. I'm like, I don't even, sometimes I'm in Atlanta, I don't even, I'm just around the world. But yeah, my name is Anika. My passion is children that have special needs. I've worked with children and families for the past 14 years. And I absolutely love that Chloe has 2 children that have special needs. I love that. So I worked with children and families in a range of settings, from being a special ed teacher. Within that setting, I kept meeting families that would say, how do I do this? What do I do about this? I'm overwhelmed. It's a population that's very overlooked, and the population that needs more attention. And so with that awareness and that experience, I founded Lapapoe, which is focused on making it easier to care for a child with special needs. Because for me, all parents deserve to have peace of mind, and every parent deserves to be comfortable in taking care of their child. It shouldn't be stressful. So that's what we're focused on with Lapapoe.
Amazing. And listen, thanks again for joining me. Like we're all connected. Well, we're reading for the first time, but we got connected through Walter, who posted out. He was giving, I guess, space on his social to kind of, share his voice, or his platform to share voices of others. And I saw that and kind of reached out to all of you and asked you, would you join me today? And I think part of it, as I've said to you, is kind of maybe my own learning and education, but also I think maybe starting point is like this conversation we're having, and you've all touched on it. You've all touched on, I guess being a Black woman and the struggles and kind of the barriers that you faced. And I said before we recorded, like it's a bit mad to me that we're having to have that conversation. And I just love to get your perspective, maybe on big question, maybe, but why is that? Why is Dr. Camille? What's your perspective on why we're still having this conversation?
Gosh, that's a lot, right?
It is a lot.
Trying to figure out how politically correct I want to be while I'm on camera. So
I'm okay with you not being.
yeah, we're still having this conversation because of racism. It's inherent in medicine, and it's inherent in all the spaces that we're in. And racism benefits someone, right? Whether it be not teaching about money in school, whether it be not having access to healthcare, whether it be being overlooked at a job, whether it be not being cultivated by leadership. It keeps certain people down, and it keeps them as a working class body, and it keeps them dependent on other folks, and it keeps them as a consumer, right? So when you're not thought to think outside the box and embrace your creativity that is given to you, or when that creativity is overlooked, you feel like you're stuck. And I keep a box on my desk often to remind myself and other people that you can be stuck in the confines of what people consider you to be and how they feel you should move throughout life. So this really is a conversation about racism and about bias and about using other people to benefit certain sectors of the population. And I'm coming from the healthcare space, right? And I have 4 degrees. And there's a certain bias in medicine. And people want to say, oh, there aren't enough Black doctors. But we do have plenty of people who are qualified. And when they're in that field, they are admonished and basically pushed out. There are positions where they have to work twice as hard to prove that they're capable, even though they have the education and everything else that they need. They're working twice as hard, and that contributes to a certain level of burnout. So one of the things that I really like about my company is that I realize as Black women, we are the most educated demographic of society, right? We have the degrees. But a lot of times, because we run into certain gatekeepers, we don't learn how to navigate certain environments, right? And that just kind of holds us in until we think about our power, how great we are. If you think about a chess set, it's the queen, right? We're the queens. And you got to knock out the queen in order to knock out her community and her society. And that's what this is. I believe in playing chess, not checkers. So when I started my company, one of the things that I said to myself was, I'm telling all the secrets. I'm telling all the secrets. And I'm helping people navigate, get to where they are and allowing them to think about their greatness and what their capabilities actually are. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and look, as I say, big question. I don't much about chess, but I love that analogy. I get it immediately. But and Anika, I saw you're probably nodding there in agreement, but there was a thing that Dr. Camille said that I thought was interesting, in that we can kind of put people in a position that we consider them to be, and we leave them there. And I think with your work, actually, I was kind of interested with children with special needs. There's probably a huge amount of that as well in for even that community.
Yeah, I love that point of view of what you just mentioned, because I think that is exactly the problem that is experienced with children and families with special needs. So a lot of it is the fact that the government, because there's this whole thing with like funding and finances, and there's all these different areas. So then a lot of these families, especially the families that are in kind of lower income socioeconomic status, a lot of them get forgotten about. Or even the families that are kind of like in the middle that aren't necessarily on the government benefits, but then they fall in between that space. Again, where do they go? Because they're forgotten about. And it's 3 times more expensive to care for a child with special needs than it is any other child, typically relevant child. So if you look at that fact, and you look at the fact that a lot of these children, these families are kind of seen as, they're not necessarily seen as high priority. I was talking to someone the other day, and they said something about the fact that people that are more able are looked at first. They're pushed higher. Working at a school with special needs kids, a lot of the children that are seen as autism or that have other needs, they were kind of saying, oh, don't worry about those children. Like, they're okay. Leave. Like, no, they shouldn't be okay. They shouldn't be left. They shouldn't be just forgotten about. Like, they have the same right. And if you cater to them in the right way, if you give them what they need to thrive in their own way, they can thrive just as well as any other child. And so for me, it's like, let's not forget about them. Let's not put them to the side. Let's pay attention to them and nurture them in the way that they need to be nurtured so they can grow in the way that they need to and deserve to.
Yeah, and create the like just opportunities. We're so bound by like, I don't know, like false views. Do you know what I mean? That we have like our own kind of, I guess, bias and, unconscious, whatever it is. But like, it's incredible how we can just hold people back. And Chloe, you touched it there, kind of, you've just launched your own collective, and like the huge amount of work, and congratulations. And we'll get on to the 3 founder thing in a minute as well. But you definitely touched on that as well, and kind of that the being held back. And Dr. Camille said, we often see there's not enough Black women doing X, Y, and Z, but then there isn't enough being done to help them get to get to the stage of actually leading.
I agree with Dr. Camille and Anika is it's not, the world was not designed for us, right? And as we look to how you navigate through any workplace, it wasn't designed for Black women to be great because there was never an outlet that was truly authentically by us and for us. I use the best analogy in my brain. Best thing that was ever created for me was the Matrix. I wish people would realize that Black women have been unplugged their whole lives. We never got the luxury of being part of a world that we had true equity and true autonomy. It's always been in the confines of where people saw us, and we don't see ourselves in abundance in the workplace, in corporate spaces. It's always seen with an ideal or a stereotype. And so whenever we are trying to succeed, we're trying to match that stereotype instead of, like Dr. Camille said, we've always been queens. We've always been incredible women. There is something about the untapped, underutilized, unending ability of Black women to multitask, to create outside of a box, to think on their feet, to be adaptable. And that's not something that any workplace is ever like a quick draw, because it's not something that you can necessarily understand. And I think we live in a world where we're too caught up on wanting to label and understand who different types of people are. So whenever you do get Black women in a space, it's this idea and this stereotype based on the last version of a Black woman that you saw. And so we end up with these things. I mean, I call it like the Highlander effect. There can only be one. And in order for another Black woman to get ahead, she's got to kill another one. But this gets perpetuated. And McKinsey, they do a Women in the Workplace report. Their report last year. This year they did basically like the myths and the truth. And the myth is that, women can't break through the glass ceiling. But the truth was that it's the broken rung that they are climbing up the ladder that lets them down. For Black women, there was never a ladder in the first place. It was broken straight through the middle. So you're trying to climb something that actually never wanted you to be great in the first place. And I think for me, that is really the space that I come from, having had, global roles based in the UK, but, had a role in the US. And so my identity and my heritage, I'm African, but African American, and have a lot of family in the US. My Blackness is in abundance in the US. I could go my whole life and go to school and have Black teachers, be surrounded by Black community, work for Black bosses. In the UK, that's barely existent. So I'm trying to be a Black woman and a bold and dynamic and incredibly talented Black woman in a space where you'll only ever see me at the top, possibly in the one. I think of the FTSE 100, there are no Black women in the FTSE 100. In advertising, it's 0.6% we have of C-suite. That's just the whole Black community. So it truly is the Hunger Games for how do you actually thrive? How do you move yourself forward? And if someone hasn't seen a skill set like yours before, unfortunately, we live in a world where when we don't understand something, we try and destroy it. So,
Right.
we're constantly going to have this battle where we are striving to just be great as Black women. But if you're in that cycle, that game, then as a Black woman, you are also going to lull yourself into a false sense of security and sometimes play that same game against your own community because of the hurt and the trauma or how hard it was for you to get to where you got to, that sometimes we also end up pulling up that ladder behind ourselves for psychological safety. And so I guess in all of the things that we're talking about, all the different experiences that we have, this is where oftentimes Black women have to create their own things very much out of a frustration because we have tried to bring our skill sets to businesses that said they see us, they celebrate us, and they want to protect us. But actually, it was only as good as they could control us. And I think that the definition for 2024 is very much not that, especially when you look from a UK lens. I mean, Dr. Camille, I don't know what it's like where you are in the world, but last week in the UK, politician Diane Abbott, he stood up 46 times.
Yeah, I've been watching that.
No one stepped in. In Adlan creative sector, Kumiko Lake stepped down from women in PR. She's been an ambassador. There are a lot of Black and brown folk who are on the ambassador team, but their board is all white. So you can't say you want to be part of the change where at the very top where it matters most, you're not doing the work. And so I think to your question of like, the why, my why would be, how did we get here? We got here because we're not asking the right people the right question. We're in an echo chamber where the same people are talking to themselves and we're speaking on other people's behalf instead of speaking together with them, because the three of us are all saying the exact same thing. But how often do you ask us?
Yeah. And sorry, because you were saying there, and it reminded me, I saw something in the news, maybe it was this week, and it was a very senior male European financial guy, right? And he was talking about, the problems with like governance and systematic, like all this kind of stuff. And I'm sitting there watching him going, oh my God. And he can have no idea. I mean, by his suit alone, I was like, how can he stand there talking about the problems that an everyday person has when he has no idea? So to that point, it made me think, when you were saying that, how can a group of people make decisions and try change things that have no lived experience of what needs to change? It'd be like me saying, here's the 6 things we need to do as an organization to improve diversity. I mean, like, I am completely the wrong person to know, right? I can help, I think, and advocate for it, but I don't know if I'm the one. I don't have the lived experience, maybe. So I'd love to get your views on that.
Oh, sorry.
Is it that we're really trying to change diversity? My mother's 80 years old, and she experienced the same things in her lifetime that we're experiencing now. So is it that we're really trying to change it? Or is it that, this is just another shadow version of what the main agenda is? Is that it? And then when we think about the questions that we ask, we're taking this to leadership. But are they purposed with wanting to make the change? Do they feel obligated to want to make the change? Or is it up to us to kind of take personal responsibility and say, hey, I'm going to create my own or whatever, and I'm going to move through the system a little differently, even though they're just the opportunities are limited. There is some way and some reason why we are actually surviving and thriving against all the odds, although sometimes it is exhausting.
But I think to both your points, Connor, you absolutely are the right person to be having this conversation. This isn't okay, well, you are having the conversation and because it's happening to you, I'm going to get behind that. Absolutely. But let me go back to the point and at least do it very much from a UK lens. 0.6% in my industry. There are no FTSE Black leaders. So it's got to be you. it's got to be, people who don't look like us, non-Black people who are advocating from the top. And actually, that's why with It Takes a Village, we say we only work with champions. Sometimes you have to understand, in order to be a true champion for Black people, for Black women, sometimes you're going to be the person that has to die on the sword first, because 46 times she stood up in a room of her peers. She's been an MP for 40 years and nobody decided, actually, do you know what? Maybe it's time for us to step in and help. So I think that's that point where I'm only going to talk from my personal perspective. I really need the white community, white leaders, to just divulge yourself of the guilt. I really that's not what we're here for. It's collective work, collective action. We really want to be doing this. I love what I do. I love the work that I do. I don't want to do it in silo. I want to do it in collaboration and in unity. But you have to understand the nuance. And I think that's where it's going wrong, is that because people have been speaking on other people's behalf for so long, they've got so comfortable with doing that when they do it with them, they don't really hear us, which is why you then see it happening outside. And that's not how the world is going to change for my sons. That's not how it's going to change for the next generation, our children. And like Dr. Camille said, I mean, my mum went through this first. She was the first Black department manager for John Lewis Partnership. She worked there she worked there for 36 years. I think she left about 4 or 5 years ago. And so John Lewis had the first Black chairperson, Dame Sharon White. If my mum had never gone first, there would never be a Dame Sharon White. And yet Dame Sharon White should be in abundance everywhere. And it's not. We keep doing this only. So the only way that the structure is going to change is if other people who don't look like us help us change it. Because we know we've been here. We've been doing it. It's for everybody else to do the work.
We'll be right back after these.
Today's show is brought to you by the Indie List CMO Collective. This service from the Indie List provides you with access to a curated range of highly experienced and talented senior marketing specialists. Visit theindielist.ie to find out more.
Are you facing the maze of global expansion? Diplomat introduces the diplomacy model, a cost-effective, innovative approach to navigating the complexities of your brand's presence in international markets. Visit diplomat.agency.
And I heard somebody say before that there's no point in having the first if there isn't a path to the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. You said something there, Chloe, that I thought, and actually before you even mentioned your son, your kids, I was thinking, Anika, you must have a perspective on kind of that voice and providing not a voice on behalf of the children and families you work for, but giving them a voice, because I think there's a discrete difference between those.
Yeah. I also want to touch on the point that Chloe mentioned, coming from the UK and coming into Atlanta and seeing that complete straight difference. There is a huge difference in terms of the amount of diversity that is allowed within the UK and how comfortable I feel within the UK versus how much comfortable I feel within Atlanta and the diversity that is here. So I just wanted to touch on that because I think it's so interesting with how much I had to work extra hard within the UK. I still have to work hard here being a Black female, but extra hard. But yeah, being the voice of, for me, I see a clear vision of a world where children with special needs are not stigmatized, are not seen as a charity, are not seen as, oh, I'm sorry. No, you shouldn't be, oh, I'm sorry. Why is it, oh, I'm sorry? They got the same thing, same child. They just have different needs. There's just certain things that are within them that are just slightly exaggerated. For example, with hearing or seeing or touching or speak, there's just certain elements that are just slightly different. So why is it on? Why is it, oh, is it a charity? Oh, is it, oh, no. So for me, because I see a world where that doesn't exist, I will continue to push and push until that world exists, until that's not stigmatized, until it's not seen as a charity case, until it's not seen as, oh, I'm sorry, Charles has been diagnosed. Why? It's just a different thing. And I think coming in within Black females as well. Like everyone is an advocate. Like it doesn't matter what their ethnicity. Sorry about the background noise. But it doesn't matter what the like, what your ethnicity, your race, who you are. Like none of that actually matters as long as you can see the world that you want to see the change that you want to bring, and speak up and provide, be that voice for that change. I don't think who you are, what you look like, I don't think any of that matters.
I love the sorry, because you kind of did it there. The head tilt moment that people give when they hear, it's like, oh dear, and how is that? Like it's so patronizing.
And it's the same thing with them being a Black female. Oh, you're a Black female founder. How is that for you? Like, don't own me. Look.
Yeah, like it is. Yeah, it's fascinating. Dr. Camille, I wanted to ask you, because both Chloe and Anika have mentioned that they actually think that they find the US potentially is different to the UK. And let's not talk about Ireland, right? Because that's a whole different thing. Were you surprised to hear that, or like in your experience, or can you? I know you may not know enough about the UK to understand it, but from your experience, do you feel the same kind of not struggle, but I guess the same kind of narrative that they shared from the UK?
Oh, absolutely. And, it's something, because it's a universal experience, right? And that really saddens me. One thing that really resonated with me in the conversation is that it is up to people who say that they're sincere about diversity, equity, and inclusion. People who say that they're sincere about creating pathways for access. People who say that they're sincere about essentially being allies. They do need to step up to the plate and show themselves. And I would say get closer to the mic and make it known that these things must happen, because they do have the power to drive things forward. As a Black woman, I feel that when it's coming from me, it's looked at as, complaining, here we go again. But when it's coming from an ally, then they can gather their own folks and have those pertinent conversations with them. So the experiences across the board, we do have historically Black colleges. I'm not sure what they have in the UK. So there are times where I can become exhausted by my existence, and I will intentionally find myself a soft place to fall where I can be loved on and just buoyed up and appreciated. So we do have those. But the catch to it is that the government tries to reduce the funding for those safe spaces. So yeah, I do have an appreciation for that.
I do too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do think that is one thing that is so much nicer about the US to the UK. Like, there's the HBCU. There is no such thing as a HBCU anywhere in the UK. Like, that is not a thing. Like, it's much more embraced. Like, your ethnicity is celebrated, is put forward. Like, whereas in the UK, it's kind of seen as a thing as you have to kind of tread lightly depending on where you go. I felt when I was in the UK a lot of time that I had to change who I was, or I had to adjust, or I had to speak a certain way. The moment I stepped into Atlanta, I was like, people look like me on TV. People speak. I can just be myself. Like, it was such a huge, stark difference. And I don't think I noticed that difference until I left UK and moved to Atlanta. And I wasn't actually going to stay in Atlanta, but the moment I felt that, I was like, I'm not going back. Like, I'm not going back to UK.
And I'll raise my hand because I'm from the Midwest, right? And the Midwest, I had to conform. I had the relaxed hair and had to talk a certain way and things like that. And it wasn't until I got out of certain environments, I went to a DC or an Atlanta or places that had large populations of Black people doing very advanced things, that I learned to celebrate, again, my culture.
And mine's the back and forth, because I went to school in the UK. I would go home to the US in the summers. And so I was like, where am I? Because here I'm comfortable. I see myself in abundance. Like, I remember the first time that I went to, oh my gosh, I can't even, my brain has gone from the right term, but basically my cousin, we basically went to a club, it's an underage club. And then we all went and sat in a parking lot, and everyone just literally, it's like 150 of us. It's 150 Black people, and just had the most amazing time. And I really had like real community. So when I came home, I went back to school, and I went to, you could go to school in the borough that your parents worked. So because my mum was at Peach Jones and Sloane Square, and I got to go to a very posh school, but it was 66 girls in my year, 60 were white, 6 were girls of color, 3 of us were Black. And so you're living in a world that is basically telling you to be like this world, but you look completely different. And so what I also grew up with was home was a safe space. School was not necessarily a safe space, but then creating friendships. My friendships didn't look like me. And I always say what I look like and what I sound like are 2 very different things based on your interpretation of what the Black woman's voice sounds like. And so I would have other Black people, other Black women be like, oh, well, you're not one of us. You're really posh, you're really well spoken. And I'm like, I talk the way that I talk. If I literally give me half a day, if I go home to LA, and my twang will be back like I've been living there my whole life. Like it just, I'm a comedian, I climatize to wherever I am. But it is also this, and I don't say it as a disservice, but I just say it as an acknowledgement, like much of the trauma and the hurt that comes from actually evolving and moving from surviving to thriving as a Black woman means that a lot of times some of the harm that happens to us most is by our own community. I always say my greatest advocates are white men. My most violent are white women. But my most harmful are Black men and Black women. And that's because it's the mirror image. It's seeing the mirror image of myself. And it's not all in any of these identities, but it's when that is the most traumatic, when you are just trying to survive, as many of us have been, and somebody harms you who looks like you. That's psychologically harder to get over than if the person didn't look like you. And when you're not there in abundance, as we're not in the UK in comparison to the US, that's even harder because you don't see yourself as often as I would when I went back to the States, or if I went back home to Nigeria. Like I don't see myself in abundance. I don't see myself winning as much. So pile that on top of everything else that we're trying to do in our day-to-day, family responsibilities, marriage, any of those other things, the weight that we carry is incredible. None of us are victims. I don't want you to feel sorry for me, but could you help me make it easier? Absolutely. And I think we're at a point now where it can't be us that keeps talking all the time. You can see it. It's there right in front of your face. I guess that's my call to action to champions. I feel some type of way about the word ally. But that's what I'm saying to our champions. Okay, but what are you going to do about it? Because now what are you going to do about it? How are you going to help? And that's why our survey is called We Can't All Be Lying, because we're not.
Right. Yeah. Can I ask then, like, what can people do?
I think this is a starting point, ask. But I think also, they always say like Google is your friend and go and do your own research. So I guess as a starting place, like to look at the landscape for Black women where you're at. And do you actually see Black women in your business? Do you have an infrastructure that encourages Black women to be in your business and to truly thrive? I think it's time for the retrospective, like to really ask the questions about what are we actually doing for Black female talent in our businesses and where we're at? And if it's not there, actually, let's change it and be really intentional, but ask the Black women who are in your community or the peers that exist in those spaces, what would you recommend? It has to be done in partnership. It can't just be, I guess, the saviorism of, okay, yeah, now I'm going to go and do this with Black women. And we're like, yeah, but we never asked you to do that. Like you've got to build a strong foundation that's together. And I can't talk for every other industry but for my own. I think it's just time to, I struggle with the word permission at the moment, but I think it's time to create and give up space and to decenter themselves from space and pass that over to Black women who are doing incredible work that benefit the whole industry, because that's where the change lies. And I've seen so many other Black women in my industry do that. You know, Karen Blackett has just stepped down as president of WPP, and she's someone that not only inspires me, but has been doing this for all people, not just Black women. So I think it's that get behind the people that are doing it for humans, but whom understand where the nuance is applied for Black women and are really being intentional and doing some work.
Dr. Camille, can I ask the same question to you?
Sure. So we've seen all this before, right? We just came out of George Floyd. My parents saw it too. You know, doing these surveys, going to these large companies saying, hey, you know, we're going to do this for Black women. We're going to create these initiatives. We're going to do this and that. And it's just cyclic. When it's popular, it happens. And then some kind of way it becomes undone. But I think that if we learn to navigate and negotiate on a smaller scale, if we have to do it one by one, kind of dismantling a wall brick by brick, that one person who is going to be an ally and stand up for what's right, bringing that one person along, bringing that second person along, bringing that third person along, speaking those names in rooms that certain people don't have access to, giving them that seat at the table, allowing that voice to be centered instead of someone speaking around us about what's good for us, and then allowing that message to resonate. I think that that's a very effective action. So it's nice that we do it on a larger scale. We've tried that, but I think that there's some nuance with the kind of like the stealth attack, right? Getting those names into rooms and getting those ideas into rooms so that people can really think about them and execute on the change.
And Anika, I'll ask you the same question as well, just to get your perspective.
Yeah, so I think looking at the industry in terms of the startup world, because I'm kind of within the startup tech scene, less than 1% of VC dollars go to Black female entrepreneurs. And I mean, not rightly so, but I mean, there's reasons for that in terms of like the kind of products that are created and things like that are backed. But at the same time, if you look at some of the questions that I've received, like going out and pitching and having like investor conversations, I've had questions that are like, oh, but are you capable of doing it? They're very much like, how capable are you questions? And I read somewhere that a lot of Black females get capable questions, whereas males get what would happen if it goes light question. And it's like, why are we getting different types of questions? Why is it that we're seen in different ways? Like, we shouldn't be seen in different ways. We should be given equal opportunities. We should be seen in equal ways. Like, don't look down on me because of the color of my skin or because of my gender, or don't question my ability because of how I look, because I'm just as capable as anyone else that is in this industry. So more people that are changing that narrative and changing, there are more BC firms that are coming up that are focused on Black females, which is great. But I think there needs to be more change in the conversation, changing the questions, changing the beliefs of what Black females are capable of doing.
It's so interesting, that point, like the question that gets asked, like, just should not be different. And again, we talk about that. We talk about that, the question, even, like pay and, not just male, female pay, but like, different ethnicities in the pay scales. And I'm just like, it astounds me. It astounds me that somebody can be doing the same job as somebody else and is not paid the same. I literally don't understand it at all. It's just bonkers, and it's mad.
It's I kind of want to come to what Dr. Camille said a little bit. Like, I totally agree with you in the stealth mode. Sometimes we have to move in silence to get stuff done. But I guess, Connor, to your point, and I think this is where the context from UK to US is really important in this case, because in the UK we don't have the luxury of being able to fall back into community in abundance, and the and the figures are so stark. And I totally hear you on, why we do things in macro and kind of talk to an echo chamber. But why we created the survey the way that we have is exactly to your point, Connor. There is no data that exists globally for Black women through an ethnicity and a gender pay gap perspective. Of all the 80 industries that exist in the world, no one has ever done it. So in answer to that question of the why, I'm not waiting for you to tell me as a Black woman and other Black women what we deserve in terms of pay equity. I'm going to answer the question myself because you've had enough time to ask it. So, and that's why the data is so important. Without that data, without something that someone can go, oh, okay, I understand. And so now I can do better. And we've given everybody enough time to be able to do it who said they were here with good intentions. So it's actually, we're going to go and do it ourselves, undeniably, globally, to a context that who I am in the US is different to who I will be in Eastern Europe, is different to who I'll be in Africa. But now, for the very first time, you'll be able to see exactly who we are and have a universal benchmark with a statistic that then everybody else has to build from. We're doing that in the UK. In the summer, the government has said, we really need you to look at your gender pay gap. I don't want you to be worrying about it in June when you're like, oh my God, how do I do this? Because we would have already done it. And I'm doing it selfishly for myself. I shouldn't have had to fight so hard for my pay salary versus my white counterparts that are like getting paid triple times that I am. I'm doing more work. But also, like I said, I'm doing it for my sons because right now, neither of them talk. So how are they going to be able to negotiate their salaries later on if they don't grow up in a world where people understand their skill set as neurodivergent boys? They are incredible. I call them my superheroes, not because they're superheroes, but because by being their mother, what both of them have taught me about myself and about their skill set as neurodivergent people, and also understanding my own ADHD and how that works. If I had never been their mother, I would never have been able to tap into that. And it's so powerful. So I think sometimes there's always a place to learn and there's always a place to grow. But the data is the part that I think that the thing that for Black women especially, because it's not made for us, or, we have to be making it for ourselves and by ourselves now, and working together with communities to actually say, well, no, this is actually where we need to build from, so that this stuff doesn't happen. Because we've got 3 different women with 3 different experiences, a lot of shared commonalities, and yet we're all having the same conversation. So it's how can we combine and collaborate? And I can take, what Dr. Camille has been through and then apply that. Okay, well, she's tried that and that didn't work there. So maybe if I could adapt or have those conversations, or, say, I'm going to try this. What do you think? And share best practice with each other. That's truly how you build and grow and collaborate. Like there's such unity, there's such power in unity. But too often we've been too siloed, and that's where people exploit us.
Yeah. And you said something there about kind of learning. And I think that like the day we stop needing or wanting to learn, like we're on the wrong planet. Right? Like actually, that's your work, right? Is helping people. And, I think that's fascinating. Listen, I've actually kept you longer than I said I would, and I didn't even realize, and looking at the time going, oh my gosh, you're all incredibly busy people. Any final thoughts before I kind of wrap up that you'd like to share that I haven't covered? No? Amazing.
I think we're at,
Okay.
from this discussion, and everyone has their different drivers, but I think that the curiosity of it all, right? We talk about the data and the numbers don't lie. So the curiosity of it all, wanting to learn, wanting our communities to be empowered, and wanting to move our communities forward, and wanting to leave a legacy, right? For our kids, and making things better. so that when it's their turn, they can say, okay, I don't have to have the same experiences that my mom had or my dad had. I think that's phenomenal. Yeah. I love the energy of the conversation and the energy of these ideas.
Yeah, I agree. Like, not, yeah, to be at a point where this conversation, you said your mom's had the same experience. You don't want that for the next generation. Like, it has to stop. But like, we're not going to, I also look at it and, I'm in marketing and I look at it as well. And I kind of go like, the work isn't going to be good if it's so one dimensional. You know what I mean? Like, and that applies to the world. Like, it's not going to be good if it's one dimensional, one perspective, people like me. And so, so it's just enough. Well, listen, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. I'm so thrilled that we got to meet, got to connect, and I got to speak to you today. I really appreciate all your time.
Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We delved deep into the multifaceted challenges and triumphs of navigating space as a Black woman across various sectors. Our guests shared their profound personal and professional journeys, and they were so open and honest. They were shedding light on the issues that persist and the determination that they have and others have to carve out paths of success and empowerment despite the issues and barriers that they face. And I won't lie, I was taken aback when Dr. Camille challenged if anything is changing, and she said these are the same issues her 80-year-old mother faced. A lot for us to think about there. The conversation went beyond just telling story. It was about inspiring action, understanding and change. And I really hope if you listen to this episode or the previous episode in the series that you share the episode, but also carry forward the messages that came through for you. So listen, thanks so much for tuning in. Our next episode will be out next Tuesday. And remember, we have a new episode every Tuesday. So do subscribe and you get notifications of when that episode lands. Please, of course, do rate and review the show wherever you're tuning in. Honestly, it's the one thing that helps us reach and build on this amazing community of passionate marketers just like you. So until the next episode, from me, your host, Conor Byrne, thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks to the Indie List for sponsoring today's show. Visit theindielist.ie to find out more.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
Are you facing the maze of global expansion? Diplomat introduces the diplomacy model, a cost-effective, innovative approach to navigating the complexities of your brand's presence in international markets. Visit diplomat.agency